You're listening to Panthers on Tap. I'm Curtis Rauen, joined by Bryson Karbley. We're just two fans sharing our love for the game and Carolina Panthers football. So join us, crack open a cold one, some bubbly, a little wine, some scotch. We don't care, whatever makes you sleep better at night. Hey guys, thank you guys for tuning in for our second live episode. The pads are finally on. We got a good one for you guys tonight. Great lineup. Bryson, starting off again. What are you drinking tonight? What do you got going on?
Yeah, another Edmonds Oast beer. This one's the tart wheat brewed with tangerine. The brewery last week, same one from Charleston, South Carolina. Very good, very good. I mean, it seems like this brewery doesn't miss. I need to get down there and go to it in person because drinking it from the can is really good. I can only imagine what it's like, on tap.
Yeah, I've had this a couple times. The salted caramel moonshine from Old Smoky out there in Gatlinburg. I'm still working through that. I feel like I've had that thing for years.
You've been milking it, man.
That thing is fermenting in the damn cabinet. But I got that going for us tonight. We're both twinning. We didn't plan this. We just wore the same damn shirt. Roaring Riot, Rebuild the Roar. But yeah, we got a good one for you guys. A first timer for us this evening on the show. That's Gabe McDonald. He's a sports anchor and reporter for Charlotte Sports Live on Queen City News. He was also a former Arkansas Pine Bluff fullback. Shout out to the fullbacks out there. You can also follow him on Twitter at Gabe McDonald _. Gabe, thank you for coming on this evening. It's good to have you.
Appreciate you guys, man. Love obviously the fullback shout out. We need more fullbacks in the NFL. Dave Canales, if you're listening, I know you want to run the ball. You say you want to run the ball. We got to get some fullbacks in there. But appreciate you guys having me on, and looking forward to talking some ball. Always good to be, just around the game and for it to be this time of year. And the time of year I always look forward to. So it's fun and glad to be on with you guys tonight.
Well, Gabe, I'm going to ask you a tough question out of the gate. I saw it on your Twitter bio, so I'm going to put feet to the fire here. It says you're a chicken wing enthusiast. So give me your top wing spots in Charlotte.
Oh, so top ones. You got to go to Mooseheads, get some bee stings down there in the Montford area. One of my top spots. Checks, they got those. Plenty of locations around town. It's kind of far-fetched, but don't knock it till you try. They have a strawberry heat wing that I tried here at home. Pretty good. Don't knock those till you try. I'm trying to think of where else off top. Those are two for sure. And surprisingly, I had some pretty good ones at an Indian spot in Optimus Hall. It's like an Indian street food spot where they had some pretty good wings. If you can't tell already, I'm a foodie. Love wings, as you saw there. But I'd say Mooseheads and Checks. Those are my top two for sure.
All right. Well, let's jump into it. You've been to a couple practices now, and I kind of want to start with the rookies. And what have you seen so far from that 2024 class?
I think you're seeing a lot of guys. Obviously, a lot of people are waiting to see what we're going to see out of Jonathan Brooks, still recovering from that ACL injury. But you have a guy in Xavier Legette coming in. We know the size. We know the strength. We know the speed that he comes with. Obviously, we love the accent as well. I still think a guy that's trying to cut his teeth in the league. There have been some highs. There have been some lows there. I think one of the things that you want to see him improve on, and it'll come with time, is obviously getting the timing down, but also improving a little bit as far as the route running and certain things too. He's not going to be able to just bully guys the way that he was able to do in college this last year. I think that's one of the things that I like to see him work on. But there are other guys as well. Shaw Smith-Wade is making some pretty good plays at the cornerback spot. Even some guys on the defense as well. But I think a lot of eyes so far have been on Xavier Legette. You're going to have some of those guys in the later rounds, like a Trevin Wallace, like a Michael Barrett, probably playing a good bit on special teams. And they're in good positions too, where they can learn from those veterans, guys like Josie Jewell that have been in the system, a guy like Shaq Thompson that's been in the league for a decade now, going into his second year in the system as well. So I think you're seeing a really hungry rookie class, but still we've only been in the pads for really just one day, and that was on Tuesday. So I think we'll see them continue to get acclimated a little bit more. I believe this weekend, this Saturday after FanFest, probably a more scrimmage-like situation. I think after that practice, we'll kind of have a true measuring stick of where not only the rookies are, but the team as a whole.
Now, you got to see Bryce Young last year at his rookie camp in Spartanburg. Compare the two so far. I know it's very early on. We've only got a little bit, to work from here. But what is the biggest difference you've seen from him this year compared to last year?
I think the thing for him now, the game is slowing down a lot more for him. You're seeing him going through his progressions, even a lot more crisper than he is. We all know how good of a processor he was coming out of school. But I think now when you have, an improved offensive line around him, you have better weapons around him. He's built really good relationships, especially with Deontay Johnson. I think you're seeing the comfortability because obviously this scheme, Dave and the staff, they want this to fit him a lot more. So I think you're seeing him being able to make decisions even quicker than before, which means the game is slowing down, but also a lot more comfortability as well. And I think if you look really closely, he's gotten a little bit bigger too. I know he mentioned he doesn't really bench press. Quarterbacks that don't need to, but he's gotten a little bit bigger. So he got a little bit more zip on the ball, been making a lot of good passes, especially really the other day on Tuesday. A lot of great passes to a lot of different guys. You're seeing him build those relationships and build that chemistry too. So I think you're seeing a guy that's a lot more comfortable, but also processing things even more quicker than he already was too.
Yeah, I think the kids call it swole. He definitely looks like he's put on some muscle. Yeah. Definitely shy about his bench press. Sounds like he hasn't been benching, but I ain't buying it. His arms are definitely bigger.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I was there Tuesday, Gabe. So yeah, I agree with you, man. Those passes, they were crisp, man. They were tight spot. They look, coming out of
And even seeing the guys, the crisp routes too. You're seeing like Adam Thielen, the one route that he had kind of in the corner of the end zone. Even Jonathan Mingo. You can't say enough about him. He's really, I know we're probably going to talk about him later, but want to mention him now. He's having a heck of a camp so far because obviously coming off last year, him going in the second round, a lot of hype coming in, kind of throwing it to the fire, so to speak. But now he has that year of NFL experience under his belt. I think the same things that I'm saying about Bryce, you can say about Mingo as well. Like he's definitely coming to in his own and trying to carve out a role for himself because obviously you look at the additions that they made in that room. That's going to be a pretty tight competition there because they're likely probably going to keep 6 on the roster. Like we know for sure you're going to have, obviously Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, Xavier Legette likely to be your starting 3. But after that, it's going to be quite a competition, but he's already standing out so far early on.
Yeah, I think they do carry 6 too. I know Tampa Bay last year, I was talking to Ricky Raines. We've had him on this show a couple of times. And Bucks, I always go back to the previous roster because I feel like coaches try to follow a rhythm with the rosters, but every roster is different. You look at Tampa Bay, they had Mike Evans, Godwin, those 2 premier receivers, and they only carried 5 last year, but I do think they do carry 6. And I do think, there's some guys that are making a name for themselves, and I'm sure Bryson will bring them up soon, but there's guys out there that are really pulling their weight and showing up early on in this camp, which is, it's good to see. Competition brings out the best in everyone. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, you're good. You're good. I was going to say we've talked a lot about like improvements, right? Like Bryce improving, the wide receiver room improving. But I'm interested to hear your perspective, Gabe, on your biggest concern for this offense going into this year.
I think one of the things that I look at, you want to see somebody really pop out of that tight end spot. I think that's a position where we really haven't seen any kind of true production since Greg left. And that's been 2020, I believe, 2019. So I think you want to see, obviously, that layer of the offense kind of be peeled back a little bit because we all know for younger quarterbacks that are coming into the league, their best friend is a good tight end to have over the middle. And if you can have a guy like Tommy Tremble, I know he's been dealing with an injury so far throughout camp, but even a guy like Jatavion Sanders coming in as a rookie with some great size and athleticism as well, you want to see him kind of grow into carving out a role. But I think that's probably the one position on that side of the ball, at least, where we all want to see more production out of because we know what a good tight end can do for an offense as far as being able to be a little bit more balanced and being multidimensional as well. I think the offensive line, I know last year, Bryce Young getting sacked 62 times. We don't want to see that anymore. But you look at what they brought in at guard. You look at, obviously, Robert Hunt, Damian Lewis, spent a lot of money on those guys. They're certainly proven that they're worth that so far. Still early, only been in pads one day, so it's hard to tell about offensive line early on. But they definitely looked the part. They got things down. Austin Corbett, too, definitely I was kind of surprised because really I thought during the draft, center was going to be a position that they addressed. I saw they were there in the second round. You obviously had Powers Johnson, the young man out of Oregon that I thought they were probably going to target there. They ended up obviously making trades and ended up with Jonathan Brooks. But I think Austin Corbett, even though it's a bit of a foreign position to him, he's looking solid so far. It's not like we're seeing a lot of issues where the snaps are high or they're too low. Like there haven't been any real QB center exchange issues, which, anytime you are breaking in a new center, sometimes you might have that early on, but really haven't seen any issues there. We all know what we have in Taylor Moton. Ike Ekwonu, that's kind of one of the biggest question marks on the offensive line. Looking solid so far. Obviously, I think a lot of that has to do with the lack of depth at the edge spot right now due to some injuries. I mean, Caleb Chason's had a decent camp, but Jadeveon Clowney, really the only one out there so far. But going back, I know I can ramble a bit, but I'd say tight end's probably the one position that I think we all want to see a lot of more production out of come this fall.
Yeah, Gabe, I'm actually glad you touched on that, and I'm glad you didn't mention Ian Thomas because I'm tired of hearing about that guy. I'm tired of seeing him. I don't want him on this team. But he's been showing up in training camp. It seems like, every year he shows.
And even throughout OTAs, I mean, we saw the connection. It's like, okay, Ian Thomas, is this finally going to be the year? We were all saying that during OTAs. Obviously, time will tell, but we'll see. We'll have to see.
And is there a reason? And I know it sounded like Canales, he wanted, Leggett to earn that role in that starting offense and having more opportunities there in training camp. And it sounds like that's slowly happening. Yeah. But you haven't heard much about Sanders. Is he has there been any inclination among, you guys in the sports media, or just what is his role going to really be on this team? And it doesn't seem like you hear his name very often pop up on Twitter during training camp or practice.
Which Sanders, Jatavion or Miles?
Jatavion, sorry, the tight end.
Yeah, no, you're fine. You're fine. Because Miles even had he had some words for some media members the other day.
And we'll talk about that a little bit.
Sure. But as far as Jatavion, I think it's one of those things where still trying to figure out his true role in this offense, I believe, because you look at what he was doing at Texas, he was kind of used all over the place, but he's a guy that has a great combination of size and speed. I think a little bit has to do is just learning the game in NFL speed. I mean, that's obviously a big transition for anybody, especially at that tight end spot. So I think it's one of those things where he should be getting a lot more opportunities now. I mean, we'll obviously kind of have to monitor Tommy's status as far as where he is as far as the depth there. But I think it's one of those things where I'm not sure he's quite got it yet to be on the field, a guy that we can trust to get the reps down. Like, he's still going to get his fair share of reps to get acclimated, but I think a lot of it has to do is just simply understanding the offense. I mean, it's a very complex offense. Dave Canales has been known to do a lot of different things throughout his tenure as a coach. So I think that's probably the main thing there, while we're not hearing his name a lot just yet. But still, we're only about 4 or 5 practices in, so that could definitely change over the next few weeks.
Yeah, definitely taking that slow growing aspect with him. I feel like, he said, he's got to get the acclimation to the offense, learning the NFL speed. But man, I'm so excited about his pass catching abilities at that position. Like you said earlier, we haven't had it since 2019 with Greg Olsen, and he really brings an aspect, I feel like, to that room that they just don't have right now.
Yeah, Sir Dog, he's calling Ian Thomas the Sam Darnold of training camps. I would agree with you on that one. I just want Ian Thomas off my team, but Gabe, let's talk about it with Sanders, the other Sanders on the team. Yeah. We all know, he was supposed to come in. He got paid heavily last year, one of the highest paid free agent running backs in 2023. Wet the bed. Chuba Hubbard, we all know it. He took over as the running back. He's trying to bounce back this year. Tell me about that exchange he had this week with media, because I heard about it, but I want to hear it from one of the guys.
Basically, just he broke off a good run, he broke a bit of a tackle, and obviously he finished the play. I mean, like any running back should, finish the play all the way to the end zone. And basically, like, hey, I heard all the talk, all the slander, reading the tweets and stuff, and I got something for y'all this year. That was pretty much the gist of it. And I'm like, okay, I mean, we're early on in training camp. If you got something, let's see it on the field. I mean, because we all want to see all these guys, succeed. I mean, this is their livelihood. I mean, they have families and stuff. Like, we don't want to see anybody, but it's like when you get paid like that, you mentioned really the only running back that got paid last offseason, you want to see him live up to that paycheck. I mean, there's a reason why we went out and got you and brought in all this money, and, just didn't really show up last year. And he even said earlier in the offseason, like, I kind of put last year to bed. I took like a few minutes to, think about it. And now he's kind of just rejuvenated and refreshed. And that's what you want to see. I mean, you want to see a guy coming in hungry. I mean, not necessarily to prove us as media wrong. We're not out there on the field, but just to prove, to yourself that you can still do this at a high level. And if it takes that to get him going, then hey, by all means, you can talk as much to me as you want. I mean, as long as you ain't saying nothing too disrespectful, like, I want you to be. I want all the we want to see these guys succeed, especially you guys as well. But I think it was kind of a high and by. Dave Canal spent too much time really addressing it, but he definitely had some. He had some words. He had some words. So we'll see how that can carry over into the rest of the camp and into the season if we kind of have a more of a running back by committee, and if he pushes to stay on the field as much as he wants to be.
Yeah, as long as it's not like that Jeffrey Simmons situation, right, with the reporter at the.
Yeah, we saw that earlier today. Yeah.
That's tough. That's tough, man. But all right, let's shift towards the defense a little bit.
Yeah.
What have you seen so far from this unit? Up to this point in training camp, I know we haven't seen a whole lot, but up to this point, I mean, what have been your takeaways so far?
I think the DBs have been showing up really, really well. I think that's been a big question mark because you've lost, 2 starters from a season ago. You lose Von Bell, you lose Dante Jackson, guys that have been here for a while. Well, Dante was, not Von, only for a year. But I think opposite JC, I mean, that was kind of a big question mark too. They brought in Dane Jackson, who's really been showing up so far throughout camp. Troy Hill, a seasoned veteran in that nickel spot, looking well as well. And also, I mean, even look on the back end, Xavier Woods, I mean, one of the smarter guys on this defense. They've really been standing out and kind of setting the standard. Typically, it's, from the front line to the back as far as, who's really setting the tone on the defense. But I think so far from what we've seen, it's kind of been those back end guys, because we know DBs like to talk junk a lot. And I think, they're definitely living up to it. JC's making a lot of plays. I think the thing with him, just staying on the field during the season. He's only played in, I believe, 22 games. I think it's either he's missed 22 or missed 29 games, one of the two out of the 51 since he has been in the league. So I think the thing with him to stay on the field, but he looks healthy. He definitely took a lot of the offseason to kind of get back to what he used to do as far as bodybuilding. So I think the DBs look well so far. Speaking of DB, Derek Brown, of course, a man amongst boys out there, still, looking like he's going to continue to ascend into he already is one of the better D tackles in the league, but continuing to prove that he can be the best this year. So I think he's definitely coming in and kind of taking on that role. I mean, when you have guys like him, Ashawn Robinson and Shy Tuttle, good luck running against those guys. Because, I mean, those are 3 guys here on the front line that are stout, definitely can move men. So I think those are two groups that have stood out so far. I think still it's kind of early to tell about the outside linebacker spot because of the injuries. Caleb Chason's been getting a lot of reps because we haven't seen DJ Wanham and some other guys. Jadeveon Clowney, I mean, he's coming in, I think, hungry to build off what he did last year. Last year he had a career year that led to him getting, this contract here. So I think you're seeing a lot of guys show up, but I think the group that stood out to me the most so far will be those defensive backs.
What have you seen so far with Chason? Because it sounds like he's the guy if Wanham ain't ready right now.
Yeah, pretty much. That's kind of what it's seeming like right now. I think a guy who's, he's quick off the ball. I mean, that's one thing that kind of was one of his main things coming out as far as him being scouted out of LSU. He was a first-round pick, obviously, after that championship season. A guy that's, quick off the ball. He's more of he's a good lateral mover as well, just, seeing him pop up on certain plays and everything. And a guy who can even make plays from the backside too. So I think you're seeing a guy who's been able to come into the role, kind of understand like, hey, people have been talking about me as well. Another guy that's been doubted, sort of called a bust too, that's looking to kind of prove it and get a second chance here in Carolina. So I think you're seeing a guy coming in hungry that's been making a lot of plays and popping up a lot so far as from what we've seen in practice. So I think he's going to continue to grow, but obviously DJ Wanham was a guy that they felt really good about. So I think there's going to be a good competition there opposite of Clowney once he's able to get back from injury and kind of get some of those reps too.
I guess I never put 2 and 2 together, but was Todd Wash in Jacksonville when they drafted him? Is that why they kind of targeted him this?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah, that was one of the reasons why, yeah.
Okay, because I know he was there. I guess he was there until 2020, so I don't know if they crossed over at all, but I know that's just thought of popped in my head. You talked about corners, and I do want to ask you, I'm just curious, have you heard any rumblings about Gilmore? I know that's everyone's question always. It always has been. Neighbors to Dan Morgan. But do you see them going out and getting anyone? I think I kind of know the answer to it, but I had to ask it.
I don't believe so. Now, obviously, this is a situation where Stephon Gilmore probably does not want to go through training camp at all. So if anything were to happen, it would be once we get into the season. Personally, I don't really see it happening. I think they're fine with what they have. I think they want to possibly use that extra money elsewhere in other things. Maybe if there's, another signing that they feel good about, I think we could still see, some additions possibly on the defensive line, maybe, or even at other spots in the secondary. I think that's some spots that they could still address too. So I know it'd be a great homecoming. Obviously, you have him and Clowney both back here in the Carolina Blue, just right down the road from where they grew up. But it's one of those things where the more we ask, Dan and other guys about it, the more it just seems like it's just not a priority right now and probably will not be at any point this season.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I know they're satisfied with the Dane Jackson addition.
Yeah. He's been showing up so far.
Yeah, he's played all right. He has. I was at Back Together Saturday. He had that pick on Bryce. I don't know. I think Mingo was somewhat to blame on that route, but it looked like some miscommunication there. Seemed like Mingo wanted to go out, and I think Bryce wanted him to flatten out the route. But yeah, they got guys like Dane Jackson, Troy Hill, Boodle, Jameson, and I do think they're high on some of those guys more than most fans probably are. Yeah. It seems like just early on, and they're ready to roll with them. And I mean, Evero, he did pretty damn good job with some of those guys last year coming off.
You look at, obviously the scoring defense wasn't there, but you look at their total defense, passing defense as well. I mean, they were able to do a lot with a little. I mean, you look at obviously losing Shaq week 2, that was tough, but for what they were able to do, just a heck of a coaching job by him and the staff, and a big reason why Dave wanted to keep that whole staff here so they can continue to build.
Before we go any further, I just want to plug our YouTube channel. If you guys are listening, got 150 plus watcher right now. We appreciate you guys. Go subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's Panthers on Tap. Hit us up on Twitter. We are talking to Gabe McDonald, Charlotte Sports Live, Queen City News. It's been a great conversation so far. Kind of want to talk a little bit more about the defense and the additions that they've added. Ashawn Robinson, and some of these other guys on the D line. You talked about the run game and then the defense holding up against the run. Can you just kind of delve into that a little bit more and what kind of impact they're going to have? Because it seemed like the last couple of years, teams offensively could run at ease on this defense.
Yeah. I think when you have guys like Ashawn and Derrick Brown, right there on your two ends in that 3-4 scheme, and then you have a guy like Shy Tuttle in the middle who's had a pretty solid career so far, solid year last year. I think it's going to be able to really having those guys to plug a lot of the holes and those gaps on the interior. It's going to free up guys like, obviously Josie Jewell, Shaq Thompson to make a lot of plays. And I think it's one of those things where you have those three men at their size, they're on the front line. I think, with what they're able to do as far as run stoppers being 300 plus, is going to be able to free up a lot of other guys to make plays too. And it's one of those things where it's going to force teams to try to run a lot more outside as far as, different sweeps or stretches, tossing, different things like that. They're not just going to be able to ground and pound directly up the middle with three men like that, holding it down on the defensive line. So I think it's one of those things where it's going to allow your linebackers to play a lot more free and sideline to sideline to be able to react and get to the ball. And obviously your outside guys as well, to easily get off blocks. And I think it's one of those things where it's going to have, Derrick Brown likely will be double teamed. If I had to put a number on it, at least 70% of the time this year. I mean, blocking him one-on-one is going to be, harder than taking the ACTs almost. So I think obviously a guy like that, he's going to command a double team. So that's obviously going to free up somebody on the back line too. So I think having guys like that have shown that they can play great football, especially on the interior, it's going to help out a lot of those guys on the outside as well. And even some guys coming down and run support from the secondary too.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Curtis and I. One of our biggest concerns about this defense, the depth, right? Edge, corner. Unfortunately, like you talked about earlier, if JC, God forbid, has another injury this year, we're looking at Dane Jackson, cornerback 1, or Wanham's not going to be ready week 1. Chase on starting on edge, opposite of Jadeveon Clowney. Do you have concerns like we do there with the depth on this defense?
I actually do. I think that was one of those things where you look at last year, like you had some solid pieces. Like obviously you're going to miss Brian Burns, you're going to miss Frankie Louvu, guys like that. I think last year you look at the depth that they had. I think it's one of those things where this year you wish they would have addressed it maybe a little bit more in obviously the offseason too. But they're still high on these guys. That's part of the reason why they haven't really made too many moves. I mean, you look at certain guys where it's an injury. You know, obviously we had David Davis go down. They just signed another running back in Dylan Johnson today out of Washington. So them replacing a lot of these injured guys that go down with, it seems like, more offensive guys lets you know they feel good about the depth. I still think it's kind of early for me to tell. I think once we get into, you know, this weekend when we're doing a lot more scrimmaging, obviously next week, the first preseason game, that's obviously going to tell a lot. But I think there's still, you know, some retooling to do. They might still make some moves. Obviously, I don't think it'll be one for Gilmore, but you can still see some other, you know, late signings or anything. You know, once the final cut is made, if there's any guys that they possibly want to bring in to help replenish that depth. But I still think it's one of those things where, you know, you feel good about your starting 11, which every team should. But after that, I still think there's a few holes at some different spots.
Gabe, do you sense any – I mean, I'm sure there is a difference because there are two different coaches, but just a difference in the overall demeanor of this team, you know, because obviously Carolina had a new coach last year in Frank Reich and then a very different coach in Dave Canales. What is your perception on Canales and how he's being perceived among the locker room and the players?
No, I think he's a guy that's come in and he's immediately made his mark. I mean, you just look at the energy and just the passion that he brings to this. And just obviously it's a guy that's in his first opportunity as an NFL head coach. So there's going to be a lot of just, you know, new energy and juice that comes with that. But I think this is who he is and how he's always been. I mean, you can ask coaches that he's been around, Pete Carroll and other coaches as well. He's been that same guy ever since he's come into the league. And now he's finally getting that opportunity to show what he can do at the highest level as a coach. I think you're seeing, you know, just a team that comes in like, hey, we got to wear that 2-15 across our forehead. Like, hey, everybody's going to look at us. They see the Panthers are on our schedule. They're going to be like, okay, that's an easy dub. But we got to go out there and make sure that it's not. And I think from day one, I mean, even my interview with Derek Brown that first day, like I could tell, like he's like, hey, it's not the old Panthers anymore. So I'm like, if you have a guy like that has that kind of mindset, when your best players have that kind of mindset and that kind of, you know, just outlook on things and wanted to get things right, I think that's going to feed off of the rest of the team. And it's certainly something that's come from Dave Canales too. And I think you just feel a different energy around camp. Obviously it's completely different, not going to Spartanburg anymore, but I think it's one of those things where you can sense a team that knows like, hey, we don't want to be the laughing stock of the league anymore. It's one thing to say it, but now let's go out there and do it. And I think so far the competition we're seeing from both sides all across the board, it's showing that this team wants to turn the corner. It's going to take time. Rome wasn't built in a day. Like, is this team a playoff team this year? Probably not. But you want to see them be more competitive, be there late in games. I think one game that a lot of fans will look at is last year against Green Bay, a game where it came down to the wire. Bryce Young arguably played his best. And it's like, if we can get that every single week and continue to build on that, yeah, you want to see more wins than losses. But if you can see that team play with that same kind of fight week in and week out, you can say, okay, we're building, we're improving. Obviously, that starts at the top with Dave, and I think he's been bringing that so far.
Yeah, I feel like we're all holding our hats on that game. I think every Panthers fan and every Bryce Young believer out there thinks if he can channel that, we're in a pretty good spot in this league. And I mean, I agree with it. He had a hell of a game versus Green Bay. Speaking of Bryce, though, I want to ask you, and I'm sure this, you know, they haven't said anything. I don't know if you guys have asked this on camera, off camera. Does Bryce Young play that first preseason game, you think?
I think he does. And he'll play a series or two. No more than 2 drives. I mean, because you got to think about it's him getting acclimated to a brand new scheme. I mean, it's kind of like being a rookie all over again in a sense. You want to get as many reps as possible. So I think we'll see him, like I said, it'll be about a drive or 2, no more than that. Now I also think, unlike last year, I think we'll probably see Andy Dalton some in the preseason because I don't know if they'll go straight from Bryce Young to Plummer right there. I think they want to get him some reps too because you never know what could go down. Obviously, we saw Andy have to come in for a start in Seattle last year and in some other situations as well. So I think it's going to be a situation like, yeah, he's a veteran. He's been in the league for a while too, but this is also a new scheme for you as well. So I think we'll see all 3 quarterbacks throughout the preseason. We probably won't see Bryce in that last game. I think we'll see him in those first 2, but he'll definitely play in this first one. At least a series. If I had to put money on it, I'd probably say he'll get 2 drives next week in New England.
Interesting. I know. I just had to ask because I saw the Caleb Williams thing. I know most people don't play in that Hall of Fame game anyway, but I was just curious.
Yes, staying with Bryce, I'd like to get your perspective on it, Gabe. I think it's a little bit of a silly conversation just based off it being his second year only, but some fans are saying this is a make or break year for Bryce Young. With the addition of the talent on the wide receiver room, on the offensive line, they're saying if Bryce doesn't show significant improvement, Carolina might be looking elsewhere next season. Do you agree with that sentiment at all?
In a way, yes, honestly, because I think it's a thing where Dave comes in with no, true emotional attachment to any of these guys. So it's like, hey, like whoever comes in and can execute this offense and execute everything to the best of their ability, that's going to be the guy. Now, are they going to, just completely blow everything up after this year? No, but I think you want to see some improvements there. And if you're not seeing, obviously the same quarterback that we saw play the Packers last year, if we're seeing, the quarterback we saw the last two games, which everybody wants to put behind them, but if we're not seeing any kind of improvement, if it's kind of stagnant, I think this could be a thing where, going into next year, there's probably going to be some decisions to make, I think, because you have, Dave Canales is trying to cut his teeth in the NFL as a head coach. He's trying to stick around as long as he can. He's going to do what it takes to win. He's going to find the guy to execute his system. Not saying that Bryce can't. Bryce probably certainly can, and they want to tailor it to what he can do. But it's one of those things where we got to find that guy if he can. So I wouldn't say I'm kind of like teetering the line. I don't think it's like just the end all be all, but you definitely want to see some drastic improvements from last year to show like, this is the guy, this is our main asset, this is the guy that we can build around, and that's what you want to see on the field out of Bryce this year.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure it doesn't help. The guy that you got picked right after him is playing out of his mind right now in Houston, and then you have the potential of Anthony Richardson in Indianapolis off his injury. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of pressure on him, no doubt about it. Sure. One other question I had, just kind of going back to the rookie situation, more on defense, though, is, you talk about it seems like Shaq Thompson and Josie Jewell are the obvious locks at the starting positions. Yeah. But do you think at all that Trevin Walls can carve out a role? I saw the other day, I think there was a highlight reel from someone on Twitter where he had a really nice tip pass, a pass breakup. But do you think he could carve something out without anyone going down, basically?
I believe so, because you look at that position group. I mean, you have obviously those two veterans, but it's one of those things where he's a guy that came in out of Kentucky as far as, just being really instinctive, being a really good athlete as well, coming out of the SEC. So I think it's going to be one of those things where he'll definitely have to earn that on special teams first, which I think they're looking at him as being a guy that can play, pretty much a core four guy that can play both, kickoff return, punt return as well. So I think that'll be his role to start. But I think it could be something where, just with how good of an athlete he is, with how instinctive he is, he could carve out a role eventually. Now, it won't be like just anything super significant, but I think with what he's been able to put on tape so far, he's definitely earned, the right to get more reps. And I think we'll continue to see him grow over the course of the preseason and into the regular season too.
Bryson, you got any other questions for him? Just one more. Like I said earlier off of camera, I went to training camp on Tuesday, and the most interesting positional group, in my opinion, for this roster is the wide receiver room. It's a really tight room. I think there's a lot of talent top to bottom, unlike last year. A couple of guys that stood out to me, Jalen Coker, one, and Devin Tompkins, the guy they just brought in. First of all, because of his size on the field, it's like a 12-year-old out there running around, but his speed is
he's a speedster.
I mean, it was apparent. Like as soon as he stepped on the field, like nobody could guard him. So that wide receiver room, I think it's really tight, especially for guys like Terrace Marshall Jr., ISM even. Like I know they brought him back and re-signed him to a contract, but with that addition, do you think guys like Coker and Tompkins and even ISM, are these guys that have a legitimate shot to make this roster, this 53?
I would say definitely. I would say all three of them do, and I think with Amir, he brings his value in the return game too. So I think that's one of the things we all remember him taking that punt back to the house against Chicago. So I think that alone is probably going to get him a spot. And then right there, like if that counts towards the receiver group, that's four right there. You're really looking at only two more guys. When you have your three starters, and that's not including Jonathan Mingo too. So you have a guy like Mingo, you have Coker coming in as well, Terrace Marshall coming back, who has made a lot of really good plays so far because he knows last year of his deal, this is truly make or break for a guy like that, going into the final year of his deal. So I think it's going to be tight. I mean, because you mentioned Tompkins and his speed. I mean, it's different. And if they feel like he's somebody that can help out in the return game as well, then maybe that makes things dicey for Amir. So I think when you look at if they only keep 6, I mean, that's going to be a competition that literally goes down until the day before that final cut at the end of this month. I mean, you just have a lot of talent, a lot of guys that can do a lot of different things well as far as, their size. When you have a guy like Terrace and Mingo that have that size and can bully guys, you have your speedsters like Amir and obviously Devin Tompkins, and even a guy like Coker coming in hungry as an undrafted rookie, really one of those more highly touted ones. I was just looking a little bit ago, one of the really only undrafted rookies that got that kind of signing bonus that he did. So it shows, how much they value him as well. I think he's a guy that could also show up on the special teams as well, as far as carving out a role there to start and maybe eventually working into the rotation. But I think for all those guys you mentioned, it's going to be pretty dicey. I mean, the rest of the camp, all these preseason games, that's probably the group I'm watching the closest over the course of the preseason. We know the top 3, but it's who are those next 3 going to be? And you have about 4 or 5 guys that are all right there in the mix. And it's going to be pretty fun to watch those guys get after it. Obviously they're going to try to make every play they can in one-on-ones and in practice and make all the plays they can in the preseason game. So I think they're in the running back spot too, just, with the depth that they have there. Those are going to be the 2 probably most intriguing positions to watch as we grow through camp, get into the preseason games, and ultimately get up to that season opener in New Orleans.
Well, Gabe, I do appreciate you coming on. We appreciate your time. We'll let you get to your important college football dynasty matchups. This guy's got a ton of teams. I think he might have a dynasty for every team in the damn league.
Just about.
But no, we appreciate you again, everyone. This is Gabe McDonald, Charlotte Sports Live, Queen City News. Follow him on Twitter. It's Gabe McDonald _ So, Gabe, appreciate you again. Thank you, and hopefully we can have you on again soon.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you guys. See you guys soon.
All right. See you later. All right, so that was Gabe McDonald. Bryson, I kind of want to go back to some of the things he mentioned and kind of just talk about that a little bit. And then I also want to, because we both were at practice. I was at Back Together Saturday, and then you were at the first padded practice. So you got probably more insight than I did because they actually had the pads on. But definitely thought it was interesting, the wide receiver thing. And I agree with both of you guys. I think that room is going to be a tough one to decide when it comes down to it at the end of the day. Between that back end, I feel like Mingo's the lock at 4. I think he's playing really well. And I do think he's gotten more opportunities. And I kind of wanted to ask you about that a little bit of what you saw from Legette, because at Back Together Saturday, Legette did not get a lot of opportunities with Bryce Young. I counted maybe a half dozen the whole practice where he was on that starting lineup group with him on the field, both of them. So it was very limited, and it feels like Canales wants to make sure he earns it. But what was your take on his role in that first padded practice?
Yeah, I mean, he definitely ran with the ones a significant amount. I think he was on the field a lot of sets with Thielen and Mingo, and of course Deontay Johnson. I would say that he was probably the third of that group, and got some opportunities, but he wasn't targeted a whole lot. He wasn't, especially on the 7-on-7s or the 11-on-11s. He wasn't throwing the ball a lot. It's no fault of his own. Bryce Young really went for guys like Mingo or Johnson or even Terrace Marshall. Terrace Marshall had 2 back-to-back catches where Bryce was a little bit off. One was low, and then another one was like outside, and Terrace Marshall made a diving grab on one and then caught one that really he wasn't expecting, and made a great catch on the other. So I think Legette just needs more opportunity, more chances to really kind of get in tune with the offense. He's still learning it like everyone else on the team, but him, rookie, just adds a little bit more to that play of his. So I think he'll have a significant involvement, a lot of manufactured touches. And I think, I don't know if that comment, right, but If it is,
no, I had to double check. I had to double check.
Okay. I was about to say, oh my goodness,
Corey King,
that'd be crazy.
You give
That'd be crazy to break live, but yeah, but I think Leggett is going to have a lot of manufactured touches because if you get the ball in his hands, he's a threat to take it to the house every time he touches it. That speed and size, corners are not going to want to tackle him. He is so strong, but yeah, I think Terrace Marshall is really making a push, man. He's a guy at the end of Steve Wilkes' tenure as the interim, really showed up and played really well, and we thought this was something to grow from, and then he comes into his next year with Frank Reich and was the forgotten man. I think Frank Reich literally forgot he was on the roster at some point, but we were struggling to get wide receivers that could catch the ball or get separation even, and he wasn't getting any playing time. But then he comes into this training camp and has been one of the bright spots with Mingo for sure. But I think that room is so tight, man. Coker I like a lot. I went with Ricky Raines. He invited me, and I went down to training camp with him. And Ricky's a big Jalen Coker fan as well. And I'm telling you, man, the routes that Coker was running, catches that he made, it was against second stringers, third stringers, but he was making it look easy, dude. And he had a really nice out route. It was with Bryce Young. Really nice out route where the corner tipped the ball and Coker caught it and took it to the end zone. Which was a nice concentration catch on the sideline to the end zone. He's got the size. I think the speed's there. A lot of concerns with him coming out, which I think is why he went undrafted, was one, talent level he played against playing at Holy Cross, and two, his route running. But his route running I didn't see any issues with it when I was there Tuesday. On one-on-ones, I think a lot of people saw a highlight where the corner adjusted to the inside on Coker on a one-on-one, and then Coker still got the inside and then caught the ball for a touchdown on one-on-one. So I really like him a lot. And then like we talked about earlier with Gabe, Devin Tompkins, the new guy they brought in from Tampa, super tiny guy. When he was out there on the field, I was like, man, is that guy supposed to be there? Like, it looks like some fan just put on pads and went out there. But his speed, he was without a doubt the fastest wide receiver out there. I mean, I don't think there was any question. The speed that he displayed and in pads, like, it was apparent that corners were having a hard time keeping up with him. And so he made carve out a role in that kick return, which is interesting. I was talking with Ricky about it. ISM and Devin Tompkins, like, it's pretty redundant to have both of them on the roster. So I think a decision is going to have to be made with ISM versus Devin Tompkins. And Devin Tompkins seems like he's a Dave Canales guy. Dave Canales doesn't have any connection to ISM. And, they're signing him this offseason and bringing him in. So it's going to be interesting to see what decisions made there. I love ISM, and I love what I saw from Devin Tompkins, but I'm glad I'm not the one that has to make that decision for the roster spot, because I don't know if he's going to clear waivers, but I know without a doubt if Coker's cut, he's not clearing waivers. He will not be a practice squad player for the Carolina Panthers. He will be on a 53-man roster somewhere else if he's cut.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from back together Saturday, I didn't see much. I think Coker had maybe one or two catches. Might have been one in the end zone. I can't remember. I didn't see a whole lot from him. A lot of his work was with, obviously, Plummer and, the third and fourth string guys. I do agree with you on Tompkins. I told Ricky the same thing. The minute I saw him on the field, I was like, holy shit, this guy's fast. He's tiny, though. He's like Bryce Young's twin. I mean, he's short. He's actually shorter than Bryce.
Yeah,
he's shorter than Bryce. But it's one of those things is I got to see it in the game. I got to see it in a preseason game. I really do, because it's so tough to tell. You can have a training camp gem out there who shows up all the time, and then they get to a preseason game and they don't do jack shit in the game. So I'm trying to hold my reservations on some of those guys to see. I do like what Coker brings. I do agree if they don't keep him on the 53, he is going to get picked up. I think there's teams that are interested in him. I don't know. I personally prefer ISM over Tompkins. I think he's still quick, and I think he adds some value to the wide receiver room. But you're right. I mean, there's a tie there. Tompkins obviously had played with Canales last year in Tampa Bay, and saw some limited playing time there. So, I mean, he definitely knows the playbook, so we'll see. And it's definitely interesting when we thought the room was, somewhat loaded already. I don't even want to say loaded because I think that's the wrong thing to say, but there was a lot more talent than last year. And they were still adding a guy like Tompkins right into training camp, like right as training. So there's clearly them poking around. And I do think they find value in that special teams return game because things are going to be totally different this year. So who knows? I mean, the question is, and I wanted to ask you this, and before we get to that, I just want to thank Zach for the kind words for us. And yes, we do need to get on the golf course. We were just talking about before the episode. We need to go golfing. That was my New Year's resolution. Told my wife that I need to get better at golf. That was my goal.
It's a good one.
So,
it's a good one.
But Bryson, back to that question: how many do you think they're going to end up carrying? Do you think they go at 6? Do they go 7 even, or do you think they stay with 6 or 5?
I think most likely it's going to be 6. I think in our projections that we're going to do later into training camp, I'm going to go 7 just because of the talent in that room, and I don't want to lose anyone. I think the most likely scenario is 6 wide receivers, and then trying to get one of those guys on the practice squad, which I think is going to be tough. I think Tompkins might be a little easier just being that he was out there. Like, he was unsigned. Carolina signed him out of he was a free agent, brought him into training camp, so maybe he's a guy they can stash on the practice squad. But yeah, to answer the question, I think 6 is probably the most likely scenario there in the wide receiver room.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of like what I mentioned before, Gabe. I think it's 6. I think that's kind of an even number. It'll be interesting to see how many they carry at tight end. Me and Ricky were talking online the other day on Twitter. I think it's probably safe to be around 4, just with Tremble, with his injury. I don't know how long that's going to last. We'll see if he's out there soon. But yeah, that's another one to watch. And then even the running back room is going to be interesting to see how that one shakes out, because it seems like they just keep adding to some of those groups, almost like they're not satisfied with some of that. So we'll see. I mean, it's a lot of depth questions, we're trying to answer at this point. But just some other observations. We can kind of ping pong back and forth if you want to. I think you got a little bit more weight with those guys being in pads, but I thought it was interesting. Cade Mays was the backup center on Back Together Saturday. He was running with the 2s, and I think I had tweeted out during the practice, do not let Cade Mays snap a ball in a game, because he had 2 or 3 that were on the ground, and it was terrible. He was actually snapping with Plummer too. So he was snapping with the 3s, and there was several bad snaps, and the guy has not played center in a game in the NFL. I mean, obviously Corbett hasn't either, but I do have concerns with that center depth. I do. I think it might have been wise to maybe go get one in the second round, and I might even go against, because I did like the Jonathan Brooks pick, but man, that room could get scary quick.
No, definitely. I mean, I think there's serious concern there, obviously, with the lack of just history played at the position. But from what Gabe said, and I think what pretty much all reports have been from camp, is that Corbett looked the part so far. No issues there. I know when I got there on Tuesday, and before practice started, Christensen was getting some snaps in with Plummer at center, kind of just practicing a little bit before practice. So Christensen might be, Christensen's got the flexibility to play guard or tackle. We know that, but it might be wanting him to get some extra reps there at center if he's needed. I think he has the capabilities to do that just based off of his flexibility at other positions. But one position I was going to talk about, I cannot remember the guy's name because I didn't hear about this guy until I got there Tuesday, but it was the tackle that filled in for Taylor Moton, because he was Taylor Moton had a vet day. The name is escaping me. I don't know if you can find it, but
yeah, I'm gonna try to look it up while you're talking.
Oh, right here it is. Traore, the tackle. So he was the starting right tackle with the ones when Moton was out on Tuesday, first day of pads because of the vet day, and he was solid. I didn't see any issues there from that right side with him filling in at tackle. And it's interesting It's a guy, you and I are both huge fans. We typically know this roster top to bottom, even in training camp. It's a guy I'd never heard of. I don't know if you had heard that name before or not, but Badara.
I had not, man. I'll tell you what, I was digging on that sheet on Saturday. There was guys, I'm like, there's a lot of new faces on this team that you got to get. I'm like, who the hell is this? I was doing that a lot. Ricky will tell you. But I haven't heard about him. He obviously, Yosh would have probably been the backup there if he was healthy. But I've never heard of him.
Yeah, and Canales mentioned him in his presser after the practice Tuesday. So said that he liked what he saw from him at that position. So that might be a guy to watch that might make the roster. I don't know. I know they got a history of Ricky Lee playing tackle as well. I was surprised to not see Ricky Lee out there. I know Ricky Lee has history playing left tackle mostly, but usually that translates over to the right side with it being a little easier position to play overall than left tackle. But Traore being in that spot really surprised me, and I thought he played well. No qualms from him from that day. But in regards to some more takeaways from when I went, I really liked what I saw of the running back room. Miles Sanders had that run that Gabe talked about where he broke it off and then kind of pointed at all the media members standing on the sideline there, and that was like towards us where we were sitting. So I saw the interaction, and it was interesting for sure. We couldn't hear what he was saying, but you could see him pointing and talking for like a couple of seconds and then ran back. So I imagined it was about, things that had been written about him in the press. And he's like, I got something for you guys this year, which it sounds like that's what it was. Miles Sanders looked good. He looked sharp. I mentioned that on Twitter a little bit. And I think, this is the year we got to see it from Miles Sanders. That cap hit is something serious for the position. And there's some depth in that room, especially with the addition of Jonathan Brooks and then Chuba Hubbard taking the job last year. I think Sanders has got to show something. And so far through training camp, I think he has shown he's still got explosiveness and the catching abilities. He caught some balls as well. And then Blackshear, I think we're both pretty big fans of Blackshear. I think opportunity-wise, he hasn't had much on this team, on this roster. But he showed explosiveness, broke off a couple runs, caught speaking of Jalen Coker, caught a screen pass. Jalen Coker had a beautiful backside block to spring Blackshear. That was a touchdown. And I was like, oh, man, Coker just keeps – he's blocking now. He's catching balls. He's getting open, just adding to that fire that I have for him to make this roster. So I thought that was cool. And then another one that I mentioned, J.C. Horn, I feel like, has gotten the best of Johnson for most of what we've seen before Tuesday. But Deontay Johnson and Adam Thielen got the best of J.C. Horn on Tuesday, first day in pads. We all saw the highlights of the one-on-ones where, Thielen had a couple of catches on the sideline. Deontay Johnson had the one where the ball floated over Horn on one-on-ones for a touchdown. And then in 7-on-7s, Deontay Johnson had a couple catches on Horn. So I thought that was good to see from the wide receiver room. Thielen has the concerns of aging, of course, but I think without a doubt, Thielen has the best hands on this team. Catches, if it's within his radius, he's catching it. He does not drop any balls. And we saw that from a couple of the highlight videos, man. He brings the ball in, and he's going to catch it. He's going to get 2 feet down or a knee down or his butt down or whatever it is. So that's some of the takeaways from camp on Tuesday. It was an exciting day to be there. Really appreciate the effort that the Panthers organization put in towards that VIP section. I think PSL owners got to purchase the tickets first and the leftover to go to the public. But, full bar, well, not full bar, but beer and then like mimosas, unlimited alcohol. I unfortunately had to drive back to Raleigh, so I didn't get to partake too much in that openness of a bar. But yeah, and they provided some food as well. I think that's awesome. We sat really close to Bryce Young's mom and dad, a couple of other family members of other players. It's cool to kind of just like, touch elbows with those folks and feel like you're really like there, So that was really cool. I'm excited to go to a couple more practices. We got a couple scheduled with one another and hopefully you can make it to the joint practice with me. I think that's going to be a super interesting practice to watch again this year with the Jets. So yeah, I mean, exciting takeaways from Tuesday. I think there's some room to grow. Obviously, I think the offensive line overall looked solid for the most part, and yeah, I think we'll see what happens throughout camp. There's some interesting battles that I'm sure we're going to get into.
Yeah, I didn't think we'd give the Teppers credit on this show, but here we are. It sounds like that VIP section is for real. I'll be there this weekend. You better be there too this Sunday. I think we're planning on going after that concert in Greensboro. But yeah, I'm excited to kind of see what that's all about. And I just found out tonight the drinks are free. So cheers to that. I mean, I'm all for that. So
yeah.
And I mean, the Teppers really got to be stepping up. In the stadium, they had $5 beers at Back Together Saturday at the Bank of America. I mean, I don't think that's ever happened, and that's like Atlanta Falcons pricing for alcohol. So,
yeah.
Granted, it was a 12-ounce Bud Light, but that's pretty damn cheap. I know Ricky had a couple of beers at 9:30 in the morning that day, so more power to him. I had to work.
You can't drink all day if you don't start in the morning, man. You can't drink all day if you don't start in the morning.
Start early, end early. But I wanted to just mention a couple of things too from Back Together Saturday. I'm glad to hear Bryce Young. It sounded like, at least from what I could tell from all the practices, that was his best practice, the one you went to on Tuesday, from all accounts, just from my observations. He was a little streaky on Saturday. I remember looking over at Ricky when they were doing 5-on-5s. It was just wideouts and DBs. And then I think there was tight ends in there as well a little bit. I mean, he couldn't – either no one was getting open or he just wasn't throwing the ball. And it was just like, I mean, he's sitting back there just waiting. And then throws would be, 5-10 yards over guys' heads. So that was like, okay, what the hell? This kind of looks like last year a little bit. So I'm glad. And he did make some plays, obviously, when it was 11-on-11 there. Had that one pick early on, but I don't think that was too much his fault. I think there was more miscommunication between him and Mingo. But I wanted to just touch on two plays that stuck out to me, and I posted them on Twitter, is the flea flicker they ran. They had the running back. I can't remember if it was Chuba or Blackshear, but tossed it back to Bryce, and then he ended up, sitting in the pocket for a bit, and then he finally found Thielen for like a comeback route for about 10, 15 yards. So that was a really nice play. We don't see a lot of that. I know you were salivating for that last year with a trick play, and, we never saw it. And so I thought that was one that came to mind. And then there was also another one I posted, which I think we saw this a little bit maybe with LaVisca, but that orbit motion they brought, I think it was Smith, it was either Marset or Leggett. They brought, and the one I shared, I think it was Smith Marset. They brought him in a motion. They call it an orbit motion. They brought him on the line. Then he came circling back around the backfield, and they hiked it. It was more of a decoy play. Bryce, I think, handed the ball off on that one, but they did another one later on, I think, with Leggett. But I think there's just a lot of versatility there, and you like to see that because, Frank Reich's offense was so goddamn stagnant last year that we were just hoping and praying for something like that, and he never got it. So, Thomas Brown tried to implement that a little bit last year, and then Frank Reich's like, fuck you, I'm taking over the playbook once the season started, and totally went from never running a pistol formation to running it the first game all game long, like just crazy wild shit like that. So, I mean, you remember last year he was like, we're saving this stuff for the season. Do you remember that? We were literally talking last year, they're just hiding a lot of stuff. They're not showing it. And that's, Icky's
vanilla
playing
offense.
Not great and all this. And then, man, we saw the future there. I mean, we really did. I did want to ask you about this because I don't want to avoid I don't want to avoid negativity just because I don't want to think about it or disregard it, because I saw something tonight and I thought it was worth talking about. I know we're all riding high. This is a new coach, but there was a video, I don't know if you saw out there, from a former Bucs player about Dave Canales' offense. And the difference between him and the guy is escaping me, the Bucs offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen. And I don't ever want to disregard warning signs anymore because we've got burned enough with coaches of other teams where, the fans are like, I don't know about this guy, but be leery of it. And then we're literally talking about what the fans told us 6 months ago. So I do think I just want to get your take on it. If you guys have not seen the video, I don't know the exact word for word what he said, but it sounded like Cohen has offers a lot more flexibility, and you have one play that has 20 different options. I can't remember the exact wording, but that was basically it. Like, there's a lot of intricacy and, allows you to do a lot of things with just one formation. And he was kind of taking a shot at Canales while also trying to be nice about it. I just wanted your take on that, Bryson. And are you concerned at all? I know there was last season, I remember there, and I've talked about this with, I think it was on the Two Fans in the Stands podcast, when last year, the Bucs were looking at 2-7. Like, they were on, if they didn't turn and flip that switch midway through the year, this could have been a whole different story for Canales. And they flipped the switch, obviously, and made the playoffs and, won a game in the playoffs. But yeah, I feel like you can't try to push that to the side and avoid it. I get this is a whole new roster, but I just wanted to talk about it because I know people, I'm sure, have their opinion about it.
Yeah, I think the guy, which is a player I've never heard of before in my life.
Same.
This player's name. I'm like, you could have told me this was somebody that works at the Walmart down the road, and I would have said okay. But he said that Dave Canales' offense was a little bit more telegraphed. Like, you telegraph.
That's the word.
The offensive plays, and there's more versatility in Liam Cohen's, which comes from that Sean McVay offense, so that makes sense. Out of a single set for an offensive play, there's multiple different things you can do. It's just different styles, which both have their pros and cons. And I think this guy, which is probably a second or third string player, again, never heard his name, is talking about he's going through this playbook now. He has to learn it. Just like players in Carolina have to learn this new offense for Dave Canales here. So I'm sure he's kind of got that on the forefront of his mind and talking about it. But I wouldn't say I have concern about what was said. I think Canales has been upfront about what he's going to do. He's going to run the ball. He's going to play action. I think we've seen already some offensive plays just through the couple of days of training camp we've had that we haven't seen in Carolina for a couple of years, with some orbit movement, pre-snap movement, and then a flea flicker. Like, when's the last time we had a flea flicker? I think the last trick play I remember was Christian McCaffrey throwing a touchdown to Chris Manhertz, versus the Saints or something. So I think Canales, while he's probably not the most developed, forefront offensive mind in the NFL, he still brings an offense that has shown to be effective. The Bucs won the division and won a playoff game with Baker Mayfield at quarterback, who was right off going into last season. Nobody wanted that Bucs job, and Dave Canales took it and aided in them winning the division and making the playoffs. So I think while some players may feel ways about the playbook and getting a new coach and probably trying to talk up their new coach while talking about the guy that went to the division rival, trying to talk him down a little bit, maybe. I think for me in particular, I don't have any concern with Canales' offensive playbook, his style. I think he's very particular about what he wants. He's very clear. 2.7 seconds, going to run the ball, going to play action, going to have a couple motions, pre-snap motions, and we're going to have maybe throw in a trick play every now and then. I think what he does, he's good at. And I think that his track record speaks for itself in regards to the quarterback. So no, in regards to your question, I what that player said does not give me any concern whatsoever.
Yeah, and this was Servose Dennis. I'm probably murdering that name. I apologize. I'm not good at that. But he was a 5th-round pick linebacker for the Bucs last year. I'm the negative one this year. That's the reality. I just am. I'm pessimistic. No to little expectations. I just want to see Bryce Young improve. I want to see improvement on this offense, and hopefully the defense can hold up with limited depth. That's kind of my baseline. If you want me to tell you what I think of this team, that's the baseline of it. That's what I want. So I do hope, Dave Canales, it sounds like he's going to be stubborn as hell with the run game, and he was that way in Tampa Bay, and it pissed fans off. It did. I remember looking back at tweets where people were like, this was predictable. All he did was run the ball, and it didn't work. And then there was a lot of people griping that they couldn't get Chris Godwin the ball last year. I remember there were several games where the guy had very limited catches, and Mike Evans was getting everything. So I do hope, obviously, I think it's a different situation. It's hard to compare the two. I'm just banking off of, his relationships and the way he's been able to, revitalize Baker's career and revitalize Geno Smith's career. And we're all hoping he does it with Bryce Young. And that's kind of what I've really been holding on to. And I hope the positive energy and what he's been bringing works, but I'm not going to avoid this. I told myself this time, like, I'm bringing this up, damn it, because we've avoided it all these other years, and then we get shot in the foot, and then we're sitting here wondering what the hell happened. So I definitely wanted to bring it up. I do think it's worth at least listening to, and I think it's going to be interesting. I literally bookmarked it because I want to see what happens at the end of the season and come back to this and see, well, this guy didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. So we'll see how it shakes out, and we really don't know. It's too hard. I think it's too early to tell. I do think people have personally way too high expectations for this team offensively. I think it's going to be slow going early on, and it's going to take a bit. It's going to take a bit. I think you're going to see it's really a rookie season 2.0 for Bryce Young with how disastrous it was last year. So I hope they add enough pieces, and I hope, Bryce Young can prove he's the guy this year, but definitely tempering my expectations. I'm trying to think if there's anything else we're missing. I did want to touch, I know Gabe talked about it briefly, but they signed a running back today, which was an interesting pick. I didn't expect them to add a guy. I know they lost Penny. Penny just retired. That's a whole other conversation that we could, I guess, talk about is the guy a couple days ago was interviewed by Mike Kay, I think it was, Charlotte Observer. We've had him on here several times. And the guy said he's one of the best backs in the league still. And then 3 days later, he saw A'Shawn Robinson and Jadeveon Clowney in pads and said, fuck this, I'm getting out of the league. I was not expecting that. You were at camp. Like, what was the buzz when you guys got there and saw that shit?
So I was on my phone, like on Twitter when it happened, and I got the alert from the Panthers, and I showed Ricky and Dunk, who was sitting behind us, and that's what we were talking about just a couple of weeks ago. He said when healthy, he's the best running back in the league, and now he's put on the retired reserve list. So I don't know if there was like an injury that occurred. That was kind of what we were talking about. Maybe he wasn't healthy, and he just quits because of his injury history in the NFL up to this point in his career. So I would probably lean that route than him just saying I'm out, and retiring. I think, unfortunately, he probably did suffer something that was going to be a setback and probably make it hard for him to make this roster. And he was just like, you know what, I'm done. Like, players get tired of going through that process of getting injured and rehabbing and then coming back and getting injured and rehabbing. Like, that's hard on anybody's mental health, much less these, top level athletes in the country. Playing at the highest level of football that we have. So I would say probably more that route, and that we haven't heard about it yet. But yeah, I mean, that running back room is stacked. They bring in his name's Dylan Johnson, right? The running back from Washington. And I think that room, Dylan Johnson brings some talent as well, coming from a team that made the college football, made the championship, right? Played for a championship and showed some talent there. But I think with, of course, Brooks, who I do expect to be week one, just based off of the time frame for his ACL, Brooks to be there, Chuba Hubbard, and then Miles Sanders and Black, we've all talked about throughout this episode. I think it was an interesting add. I agree with you to that room, and maybe they could have brought in some talent on the edge or another corner, but like what Gabe said, I think their additions where they've made when people have gone down or they've put people on the injured list and added to areas like wide receiver and running back, I think it really speaks to their confidence they have in the depth at those positions right now. I think, they bring in Kamika Toure, sign him from tryouts, and then they really haven't added much to that cornerback room to start camp. So I think that really speaks to the confidence they have in Bootle, Jameson, and Chason, who has, we can say what we want about his time in Jacksonville, but he has had a solid camp. When I was there, I remember one play in particular. It was a play action. Bryson booted to the left, and Chason was in his face. Like, Chason was there. It probably would have been a sack if it was in a game. And then Bryce threw it over Chason and to Ian Thomas, your guy, who was wide open and caught it, and then probably would have been a touchdown. Or it was a touchdown at training camp, but it wouldn't have been in a real game. It would have been a sack. So I think the talent they have there, or what they believe in the talent that they have there at those positions really has been spoken for in regards to their additions to other areas.
Man, I really want Jatavion Sanders to get more reps. I don't care if the guy, whatever the case is, he needs to be getting reps out there. Like, this Ian Thomas project, the breakout, it's not happening. The guy's been on this roster for 4 or 5 years, and it just hasn't happened. He's made plays in training camp, and then when the lights come on Sunday, he's got a drop ball or whatever the case is. They need to give this guy opportunity. Give these young guys some opportunities in here, and let's see what happens. Sorry, you mentioned Thomas again. It pissed me off, so I had to go off on a little rant. But talking about that Dylan Johnson guy that you mentioned, I'm looking at his draft profile. This is Bleacher Report. Just pulled this up quick because I don't know a hell of a lot about him. They're saying he's a sturdy runner, impressive with balance. He's got excellent vision and footwork. It sounds like he lacks speed and acceleration, so it seems like he's a little bit bigger of a back. Get you some yards between the tackles. We'll see what he's got. Again, I think that room, I think it's Hubbard, Jonathan Brooks, obviously, when he comes back from injury, he'll be the one, I would think. It might take him a bit. Miles Sanders, and then I think Blackshear, I don't see really anyone. I just think they're just bringing in a body. I think they just wanted that's why they really brought in Penny, and I know Penny kind of knows Canales, so he was kind of a Canales guy. But so, we'll see what he does. He like you said, he played at Washington, played actually pretty well from seeing some of these highlight reels and videos of him. I tweeted one of them out today from a guy because he was on the Titans roster and just got he was an undrafted guy for Tennessee for a little bit. But yeah, I'd like to see some of these younger guys get some of these opportunities. We know what Shaq Thompson can do. Obviously, we don't know what Josie's Jewel. We can, infer from his role in Denver, but we don't know what he's going to be with some of these other guys in Carolina. So, I get you need to get those guys familiar, but I'd like to see what Trevin Wallace can do. I'd like to see what these young guys can do because, this team, we're really starting from, from the bottom up again. Like, this is really a rebuild. They got rid of a lot of guys, 5 starters on defense, pack the offense, and see what they can do. So, I would like to see some of these young guys, and I really do hope when Jonathan Brooks get a chance to give him some opportunities, and I really do hope he comes back soon. I know he's coming back from that ACL. I think he injured it in November of last year, but I'm really excited because he was quote unquote the best back in the draft, and we have not seen him on the field yet. So, that could add another big boost to this roster as well. I don't want to keep getting long-winded here, Bryson, but I do want to talk briefly about Adam Thielen because I've seen the talk on Twitter, so I got to ask you about it. I've seen the rumblings. JJ's heading the storm on it. We've had him on Panthers Culture, and Adam Thielen. I've seen, should he get cut? Should he get traded? I I'll give you my brief, synopsis, kind of how I feel. I don't know how you get rid of Bryce Young's number one target last year. I don't think it's a smart move. Is he the fastest guy? No, I don't think anyone believes that. Does he still get open and has pretty good hands? Yeah, I think he does. And I think he proved that the other day in training camp. He proved it all of last year. And I don't think it's very bright to get rid of that right now. I know I've kind of, been preaching, give these young guys some opportunities, but I just think that connection with Bryce Young is too valuable. And where he's at in his development, I don't think it would be too smart to get rid of him. What's your take about Thielen?
I've gone back and forth on it, a little bit. I started with no, then like going to training camp on Tuesday, I was like, yeah, maybe with Mingo's breakout and these other guys like Coker and ISM on the roster, maybe, you move on and take that chance. But then I watched practice Tuesday, and he is clearly, without a doubt, he has the best hands on this roster at the wide receiver group. On anybody in any group, he has the best hands, like I talked about earlier. And I think moving on from the only player on this roster has a connection with Bryce Young, without a doubt, is Adam Thielen. Moving on from that, I think is taking a major chance that you don't have to take. Like, he's under contract. He can still play. He's not immobile. Like, he's slow, but he still gets open, like you said. And when he has the opportunity to catch the ball, he does. I think his hands are spectacular. And we saw that in those videos that were, going viral from training camp on Tuesday. So I think moving on from him would just be irresponsible at this point. Of course, we would like to see these younger guys get reps and opportunity, but I don't think now is the point in time you do that. I think he showed he can still do it. Last season, he was a kind of a comfort zone for Bryce to just throw to when nothing else was there. And hell, he got 1,000 yards receiving from that. So I think, no, I would not move on from him. I think right now you keep him on the roster. He's going to be your slot receiver. And then maybe next year we have a conversation about moving on.
Well, do you have anything else you want to talk? Oh, we haven't talked. We got to talk kickers because we finally got to see. That's the one conversation I wanted to touch on because this is our first time. I think, did Mevis kick when you were there at all? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we both got to see Mevis. We obviously know what we got in Eddie. What were your thoughts on Thicker kicker?
Yeah, he went 5 for 5 in the 11-on-11. He made a 54 to end it. All kicks looked like that. Plenty of juice. Probably could have went a little bit further back and probably would have made it. It's very interesting to watch the dynamic between him and Eddie Pinheiro. They literally do not say a word to each other throughout, just standing around, same positional group, kicking to the right when, the wide receivers and quarterbacks are throwing and catching. It's a very interesting dynamic, but I think it's an uphill battle for Mevis, I would say. When you talk about, Pinheiro's relationship with Jansen and with Hecker, Pinheiro's the one that's walking with the group and Mevis is kind of walking behind alone. I think Pinheiro's been good in camp. I don't think he's had very many misses. I think he went 5 for 5 the day before I was there, or the training camp before I was there on Tuesday. So I think it's an uphill battle for him to make this roster, but I think Mevis is making a case for himself, especially when he's continuing to go and make these kicks 5 for 5 and not missing, when they're doing the drills that matter in training camp. And of course, he's got the leg that we all know. He can kick it further than Pinheiro can. And coming off a season when I think it was a 52 or 55 yarder, Pinheiro misses and he shrugs, like, well, I can't make that. Why'd you put me out there? I think it's definitely an interesting dynamic, and we'll see how it plays out. But if I had to guess right now, I would say Pinheiro's the kicker game one, as we see right now. I don't know if he's a new contract or whatever it may be, but I would say he's got the upper hand or upper leg, if you want to say, for the kicker position. So maybe Mevis does continue to challenge and make it a pretty hard decision on a roster cut down, but right now I would say Pinheiro's the favorite.
Yeah, I would I tend to agree with you in a sense. However, I go back to the Dave Canales no ties to Eddie Pinheiro. And there has been, I think it actually happened to Eddie. He was, and I can't remember if it was with the Jets or Chicago, but he went in training camp and never missed a kick with one of those teams and ended up getting cut. So I wouldn't be shocked if they went that route and went with Harrison Mevis, sticker kicker. But just my observations, I went to Back Together Saturday. I sent you guys, probably saw the video by now. The guy, without a doubt, has the leg. He drained a 55-yarder. It was just, a guy snapping it and him, it was no team in front of him. It was just, I think, Hecker was holding and, JJ was snapping. He was just kicking on the other side while the offense was running 11-on-11. Drained a 55-yarder. Then he came in during team drills, 11-on-11 during special teams, and he missed a 40-yarder and then a 52-yarder. So I think there's some, give and take with him. You're going to get the big booming kick, but you're also going to get some bonehead misses too. So what do you want? Do you want the leg where you can kick, you have the opportunity to kick a 60-yarder with him and then hope and pray he doesn't miss the 40? Or do you want, Eddie, who for the most part, barring really the Atlanta game where he made most of his kicks 45 and in, and then 50 and up is a question mark. So it's what really do you prefer? I do think, like you said, I appreciate Joe Person because Joe put this out in his article this week. Mevis is 14 of 17 so far in training camp, and Pinheiro is, it sounds like 10 for 10. So he's only had 10 opportunities, and I think a couple of those for Pinheiro were a couple 50-yarders as well. But there's no doubt about it. Mevis has the bigger leg. He can kick farther. And I did see, I don't know if you caught this at all, but Mevis was also, he was when they did, they were doing special teams kickoff drills on Saturday, and Mevis was the one kicking off and practicing that. So I don't know if they're trying to get him more reps because obviously the rules are different than they were in college. And I mean, they're different, I guess, too, for Eddie, but he was the one getting most of those opportunities on Saturday. I don't know if you caught that at all. If Eddie was getting some of that on whatever, Monday or Tuesday when you were there. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely a competition, and I think we'll get a better idea once the games start, and we'll see, and hopefully they get some opportunities.
Yeah. I didn't catch it. Unfortunately, I wasn't paying attention to that. I was looking at, they were kind of doing the kickoff scenario the same time they were doing ones with the quarterback and the wide receiver. So I was watching that more. But if I'm not mistaken, I think it was mostly Mevis doing the kickoffs. So I can't speak to 100% on that, but it does sound like they are trying to get Mevis those reps to really see what he looks like on kickoff, because I know there's different penalties now. Like if you kick it to the end zone, I think they give it at the 35 maybe. The return team gets it on the 35 if it's a touchback, which is crazy. So many different rules are going to look completely different this year. So yeah, I think they're really trying to evaluate the position and see who's the best option moving forward. Like you mentioned, like of course the thicker kicker might be inconsistent, in that 40 and up range or 40 and in range, but then has the bigger leg. But Eddie Pinheiro has been consistent for the most part. 40 and in, and then the outside of 40 is where he really struggles. So it's going to be interesting to see moving forward, that competition. But like I said earlier, I think right now it's Pinheiro's job to lose, and we'll see what happens throughout training camp.
Yeah, I just want to shout out Edgar. Appreciate you, the comments, kind words, and hopefully we can get you on soon. And we need to get you to Carolina and go to a practice or a game, because I'd definitely like to finally meet you in person. But yeah, we'll be at training camp this Sunday in the VIP section. So if you guys are going, hope to see you there and meet some of you. Caleb, just to answer your question briefly, has a team ever had two kickers? I believe. No. I want to say yes, or not maybe two, but yeah, maybe not.
Not on the active roster. No.
I'm thinking of. I'm shocked Carolina has it, because that sounds like some stupid ass thing they do. But I'm getting confused with sometimes punters were kickoff. They would be the kickoff kicker and some. So that's kind of what was throwing me off. But yeah, I don't think that's ever happened. And I look at it this way, just like QB. If you have 2 kickers, you don't have any kickers, and that's the way you got to look at it. So
fair point.
But we're gonna leave it there. So yeah, we'll be there on Sunday at training camp practice, and then we're gonna be there on the 10th and 11th. So then the following weekend, Saturday, Sunday in the VIP section. And I may have a ticket available for someone who wants to join us. I don't know. I don't want to throw that out there too much yet because I'm not entirely sure, but may have an extra ticket for the VIP section. Bryson, you're building it up. It better be damn good. I want top of the line, Crown Royal.
No. None of that. None of that. I mean, they got mimosas and beer.
Hey, I'll take it at 9:30 in the morning. But we're going to leave it here. We appreciate you guys. Again, we have a ton of people listening right now. If you guys can go hit that subscribe button on YouTube, please hit the alert so you can get notified when we're doing live shows, when we're posting on YouTube. And then obviously you can listen to us wherever you get your podcast. We'll drop this episode in the morning. Sir Hen Dog III, appreciate your support. I'm done with my drink. If you didn't tune in right off the top, but I was drinking some salted caramel moonshine from Old Smoky. Just had a little thimble of that, and Bryson's got some sort of beer. You can tell him.
Yeah, I was drinking Sunkissed from Edmonds Oast out of Charleston, South Carolina. It is a tart wheat ale with tangerine. Killed it like in the first 5 minutes of the podcast, so it was interesting. Yeah, Sir Hen Dog is a guy on Twitter that I've had a pretty close relationship with. He's a Marshall fan as well. So Curtis.
Oh boy! All right.
We're thundering herds, baby. Thundering herds.
Oh boy! Another 4-10 season for you guys. Sounds good. Well, no, we just want to thank everyone for tuning in. We'll be back again next week, Wednesday. We got some another good guest coming up here, so stay tuned for that. And we just appreciate the support and keep pounding.